Hey again, everyone. I am back. Sorry for the long hiatus here. Um, so, I got a couple things I want to say before we get started with home. I just saw this online on the PlayStation Network, and it was like $5, so I figured why not. But a couple of updates here is that one, I did few weeks like back in November, I did get a new job in Japan, and I will be leaving at the beginning of March and heading over there. And once I'm set up shop, things will be back to normal. But even though there's a couple of games coming out in January that I do definitely want to record and play and upload, it may be some time before that. And if you're wondering about Prince of Persia, that's just on hiatus for the time being. I will finish it. I actually need to finish uploading the footage I do have that I recorded way back in September. It's now January. So that's one thing. Another thing, because I was using my mom's system, I like bought a new. I was using my mom's computer to record, so I bought a new computer for myself for when I go over there, and just having some issues with the recording. The commentary would like when it came to the commentary would be behind in some videos that I tested, and it just looked awful. So I tried a couple. So because I was trying to record it with my audio commentary being like a separate file, and I think that was the issue. As well as like 60 frames per second on a game like this. This game doesn't use 60 frames per second, so that's stupid to use that. So I turned like the separate audio recording as well as the 60 frame per second off, and that seemed to work. But then there were a couple of issues with other games I was wanting to upload, and they just weren't recording the way I wanted them to. So I was having a lot of technical issues. Was part of the reason why this was my channel has been kind of slow. But I do plan on recording some more games. There's going to be Home. Resident Evil just had an HD release for the current gen consoles. I got that pre-ordered. I do plan on playing that. I also have Grim Fandango pre-ordered. I believe it's called Life is Strange. It's the new game by Don't Nod. It's an episodic game series that looks really interesting. That doesn't come out until towards the end of this month. I also plan on recording that, and I'll be because I'm leaving at the beginning of March. February is going to be busy, so I'll try and get as much done as I can between now and then. But the closer it gets to March, the more busy I'm going to be, and hopefully there will be some free time I have while I'm over there. But I'll likely be recording some stuff outside of video games and shit about Japan. That being said, I do apologize for the long wait, but here we go. Let's play Home. Your game will be saved automatically at certain points. However, we recommend you put aside an hour and a half and complete Home in a single sitting. Okay, well, so it's not a long game. All I remembered at that point was finding myself alone. Uh, where was I? It was so dark. There was something by my feet. A flashlight. That house. Where was I? Okay, so we got already got a Resident Evil little shout out here. I played Lone Survivor. Lone Survivor is a little more detailed than this, but it's somewhat similar. There was a body. Who was it? Hi, kitty! The desk had a computer and some papers on it, and a single drawer. I didn't want to snoop, but did I open the drawer? Receipts, pens, and a blurry photo. Looked like a store of some kind. Why did this look so familiar? Blood on the wall. It smelled fresh and sickening. I realized there was blood on my shoes and pants. Man, I had to get out of there. I wonder what's the unique survivor horror experience. or unique horror experience. I noticed that I limped as I moved down the stairs. How did I hurt my leg, I wondered. All I could really recall was coming home, seeing Rachel. I was upset. She looked afraid. I shook my head and tried to clear it. I knew I should head downstairs, try to find a way out. The shelf was full of books on local history and hunting. Seemed like the owner of the house really knew the area. Okay. An old dining table covered in dirty dishes for two people. There are dozens of beer cans and other liquor bottles among the dishes. The smell was turning my stomach. A black and white photo looked like the man upstairs and his wife, I guessed. There was no reason for me to keep this. Did I take it? I slipped the photo into my pocket. Maybe this would help me find some answers. It looked frantic but exhausted. Did I free it? Why not? A collection of rusty tools. These looked like they'd seen a lot of use and were caked in damp, smelling dirt. Why weren't they in a shed? A photo similar to the one I picked up. It'd been moved a lot. There seemed to be a switch behind it. Did I push the switch? It depressed smoothly into the wall. I heard a faraway click somewhere. Okay, I thought it was like highlighting because I walked near it. The door was taped up and seemed to be stuck. By the smell, I guessed it led to the kitchen. That switch in the wall worked. The door had been unlocked. There's not combat in this game, is there? The box looked heavy, but there were marks in the floor. It had obviously been moved before. Maybe I'd found a way out. I must have moved it, right? I heaved the box forward and it finally gave. Let me explore elsewhere first. Okay. There were sheets of paper all over the kitchen table. It looked like a series of names written down, but they were too smudged to read. I could only make out a few of the notes. Keycard. Ocker. Last one. I promise. It didn't make much sense at the time. Oh, Mousy. Okay, I unlocked a trophy, obviously, but I don't know why. The bathroom was spotless. Everything had been wiped to a sheen. I wondered if it was the man's wife who did the... There was a photo development tray lying on the floor. Some leftover negatives were sticking out. I thought I saw what looked like treetops. The front door was blocked by a pile of furniture. I knew I had to find another way. I looked like hell. My clothes were dirty and torn, and there was mud caked all over my shoes. There was a ladder going underground where the box was. A dank smell rose from the passage. Did I climb down the ladder? Where else were we going to go? I looked again at the photo I found in the house. The couple looked distant, like they didn't want to be in the same picture. I wondered where the wife was. My leg was in terrible shape, but I had to get out. Footprints in the dirt. Some kind. A lot of traffic. Places all over were marked. old map of town. The industrial area near the river, various houses, and even the water tower near the old rail station. Newspaper clippings from the local. They were all about murders in town over the last few years. There were photos. Photos of our house. What the hell is that about? Maybe I should have looked around more, try to find some kind of information. Rachel, please be okay. I wanted to rush home, but I had to find a way out first, and I needed to see what else was down there. Oh my God. It was so dark down there, and the air smelled stale and putrid. I couldn't believe what I saw. What was this place? The desk looked old and was caked with grime. On it was a stack of old faded paper covered with what looked like names. They were scratched out, and illegible notes were written beside them in faded blue ink. I could only make out a few letters. None of it made any sense to me. Crudely made shelves. They looked like they were holding cans of some kind of corrosive. The labels were worn and slick, but I could still see the warning. It looked like a cage. It was small, but there was something coating the bottom. Something wet. Some kind of homemade rack, slung together with poorly cut wood and rope. It was caked with old blood. Somebody didn't actually use that. Like a torture device? There looked to be bones half dug into the ground, and the remains looked old. The faded clothes that stuck up amongst the dirt they looked like the clothes that woman was wearing in the photo I found. Was this the man's wife? Oh, he is kind of limping. Some kind of old boxes. They looked like they were years old. Wait a minute. These boxes had old clothes in them. Clothes I remembered throwing out after Rachel and I moved. What the hell were they doing there? Okay, it's bats. That's what I thought. I remember noticing the broken ladder. I had to be careful. I don't remember if I jumped down there or found another way. It looked to be a long way. Did I jump down? Maybe there's some other way to get down there without risking any more injury to my leg. There was a rope hanging there. I wasn't sure how sturdy it was. Did I take it? Maybe the rope would make that broken ladder easier to descend. It sounded like there was whispering. I could hear a faint hum, and the smell from before started to get worse. A bunch of old newspapers, wheat pasted together. A message had been hastily smeared on it. Keep out, danger due to cave-in. What kind of place is this? My hands tingled from the burn of sliding down that rope. It was lucky I found that. Who knows what would have happened if I had jumped down. Still, it was all I could do to not have rushed out of that awful place. That rack, those terrible tools. What the hell was going on back there? The metal door groaned as I leaned into it, causing my heart to skip a beat at the sound. As I peered ahead into the dark of the next room, I worried that I should have taken that gun I saw. But me, with a gun? What gun? I didn't see a gun. What's this? There was dirt on the ground. It looked wet, and there was grass smeared with it. Oh, shit. I could hear a faint trickling sound like water. What was that? A kitchen knife covered in drying blood. Thinking about it made me sick. I didn't even want to touch it. Did I take the knife? Somehow the knife seemed a better idea than the gun in that tunnel. Okay. God, I don't know what this is. I'm heading back up that ladder. Yeah. So, it's a little weird. Disgusting. It was a mess of filthy garbage bags. There were rips and tears in most of the bags. What looked like an old videotape was sticking out. Did I take the tape? I wasn't sure what I hoped to discover with the tape, but I took it anyway. Don't feel like going out there yet. The door was locked. There was a musty smell from inside. I wasn't sure, but I thought it was some kind of regulator. I had no idea how it worked. Before. Did I turn it anyway? Not yet. I left the valve alone. We'll likely have to turn that, but I don't want to just yet. There was a rusty ladder sunk into the water, which smelled disgusting. I knew I couldn't climb down that. Maybe I could find a way to drain the putrid. Okay. So I think we need to turn all the valves. Okay. I thought I could turn this water valve to shut off its flow. It looked like the water drained out in the wall. There was a small metal key left floating in the shallow pool of rancid water. Did I take it? I pocketed the small key, but it was so odd-shaped I had no idea what it might open. Let me try that one door up here. There's like absolutely nothing going on. Like, there's no monsters or anything. It's kind of putting me on edge a little. Is there a way to use items? It looks... Okay, I guess it doesn't. The safety poster had definitely been seen better days. How old was that facility? The door was locked. I could see a faint light within. I found another dead body. A sewer worker. By the wounds all over his face and body, I figured he'd been stabbed repeatedly. There was a key ring sticking out of the man's pocket. Did I take it? I thought about the knife I had found with some disgust as I carefully picked the keys from his pocket. I was almost worried he was going to grab me. There was a security camera in the room. There must have been a way to see what had happened. Maybe the VHS tape I found could be useful. It's gonna be like he did it. Oh my god. He's the one that's killing everyone. There was a hint of fresh air here. I must have been near an exit. But I wondered, what did that key I found on the sewer worker do? And what was on the videotape I found? An exposed ventilation shaft. Maybe someone crawled through there. But it was so high up, that must have been a sore landing. There were other locked doors, weren't there? Was it this one? The shelf full of security tapes was strictly organized, though covered in dust. It looked like the tape I found was the one that was missing from the shelf. There was a dusty VCR on the security desk. I wondered what was on that VHS tape I found. Did I play the tape? Oh no. The video showed a man right there in the sewers being attacked. The tape looked fuzzy and stretched, like somebody had tampered with it. It looked like there could have been two men. Those creep me out, those lamps. I know it's supposed to be like a lamp in the shadow of the light, but it looks like someone's like a little girl and her hair is like she's hanging upside down somewhat. It's creeping me out a little. The knife I now carried in my boot weighed heavily upon my mind, as did my sore leg. The thought of that videotape, though, still gave me chills. Who was it that didn't want to be seen? And what was in that locked room? As I climbed that ladder, I felt a terrible need to get out as soon as possible. Reaching the top, I pushed on the heavy lid above me, and the putrid smell of that sewer gave way to the scent of pine trees. An old ladder leading up to an ancient water tower. The ladder needed to be extended so I could climb it. Did I extend the ladder? I popped the latch and brought the ladder. Let me make sure there's nothing. I tried the little key I had fished out of the murky puddle in the sewers. It fit, and I heaved open the rusty door. The wind was picking up a bit. The night air had become strangely chilly. Me. See? The old train station was quiet as a tomb. The only sound was that of the increasing wind buffeting the decrepit structure. Let me go back to the water tower, sorry. Is it unique in that there's not, like, it's kind of like a mystery? I don't know. It's like there's nothing happening, really. Like, there's no threats. And it's making me nervous, because I feel like a threat is going to come up at some point, and I'm not going to be prepared. In a patch of smeared dirt and grass, there was a beat-up old wallet. I thought it was mine. Did I take it? I folded the wallet and returned it to my back pocket. It looked nicked up somehow and really worn. There weren't any cards or ID in it. I thought I should recover my credit card and driver's license at least. Had I come through there before? If I did, someone definitely could have seen me. does that say? This must have been the entrance to the forest that was mentioned on that map I had seen. Whoever was poking around in those tunnels underneath that man's house had scribbled notes on this place, but I couldn't make them out. Here, the sign pointed out various campsites and walking paths within the woods. It mentioned a river and maybe a washroom, but the rest was too faded to see clearly. I'm gonna take a look at that train station. The ancient ticket booth was falling apart and covered in dust and grime. Stacks of paper lined the counter, faded remains of old schedules and reports. Among the papers were newer looking sheets covered in scribbles and illegible notes. Come to think of it, the man in that house had kept similar scribbles hidden on his bookshelf, and he had notes on the water tower outside, too. I guess he could have been coming here. What was he using this old station for? An old map encased in glass hung on the wall. It was the train routes connected to that old station. As I looked at it, it seemed familiar. Of course, the map I found in those tunnels had similar locations marked, and the notes I found in the other man's bookshelf. His notes mentioned the water tower and even this train yard. What was he doing coming back here? In the torn opening of that ruined train were heaps of dirt and stale water. At the bottom, I thought I saw a scrap of cloth. As I looked closer, I could see that it was definitely some kind of nylon, maybe a windbreaker or some other outdoor. There was too much of a mess on the ground to see any kind of footprints, but someone or something had definitely trod a regular path. Anything else? Oh! Sorry, I didn't realize that was like leading anywhere. Okay, well, I guess we'll go here. Trampled into the dirt and grass was a plastic card of some kind. I brushed it off and was surprised to see it was my credit card. I wasn't sure if it was still usable, but it was mine, so I took it back. I pocketed the credit card. Hopefully I could find my driver's license, too. Through the fence I could see a dilapidated outbuilding. I wondered if I could find my way around. Let me go the other. There was a river. A dry old picnic table sat lonely amongst the trees. It had carvings and marks from years of previous campers. As I tried to read some of the names and the marks, I idly thumbed the knife I'd found. If I wanted to, I could have carved something on that table. Did I? With a few crude strokes, I etched a simple design into the wood. R+H. I felt like a teenager defacing the table. The path ended in a cold-looking river. I wasn't sure if it was safe to cross like this. In that darkness, it didn't seem wise to try. Maybe there was another option. There was a fire pit there. It was still a bit warm, and a few embers still burned at the bottom. Two folding camping chairs were on the ground. One was knocked over. There were a couple of cans of beer spilled on the ground. The cheap dome tent slept two people. I shone my flashlight inside and could see some bedrolls, two backpacks. Nothing else. My controller vibrated for what? No, no. Look. Let's see what else there is. Can't remember. I think I came in. Let's take a look. Let's ignore the warnings. The grimy sink had a small patch in it that looked almost clean. There was a damp-smelling plank leaning against the stall door. I might have been able to cross the river with it. I managed to carry the plank under my arm so it didn't get in the way. Okay, this is where I came from. So where does this one lead? The sign was the same as the first one I had seen. This must have been the exit to the other side of the woods. I'd finally found the exit. Once I left, I knew I never wanted to return there. It vibrated again. There were some personal effects shoved back into the... Wait, there was a notebook there too. Did I read it? Inside the cheap dollar store notebook was page after worn page of names and lists. None of it made much sense. The newest page contained several names. Heather, Olivia, Ashley, Cheryl, Iris, Daphne, Holly, Rose, Rachel. Rachel? Her name was last on the list and had a mark beside it in blue. The names Daphne and Olivia had been crossed out in the same blue ink. Cheryl, Heather, and Rose had also been crossed out. These marks looked older and more faded. That looks similar to the list we found in the sewers. The plank I found was long enough to form a crude bridge, but I wasn't sure if it would hold. Why is it vibrating? Two bodies, two young women, were half dug into a hasty, shallow grave between the trees. The younger-looking one was still face up, her dead eyes gleaming against my flashlight. They deserved better than that I clean up the gravesite. I tried to cover them up a bit more, and I closed the younger woman's eyes. I fashioned a crude marker. I wasn't sure why, but I felt I had to do something. The girls weren't carrying ID, so I couldn't determine their names. I only hoped that whoever had done this had done. I wondered now if they had a phone or something at their campsite. Maybe I could call for help. What else are we going to do? Okay, I unlocked a terrible tragedy. Oh, I think that... Yeah, okay, so we did enter that building. The inside of that tent was suffocating. Olivia. By the looks of it, the fire hadn't been extinguished, it had just died out over time. Guessing there is no phone or anything. I don't think I ever found my driver's license. Through the dense trees, I could finally start to see some light. I must have been at the edge of the forest, though I wasn't sure where the path ahead of me led. I could almost feel the cryptic notebook in my pocket as I tried to think about what it... And where were the campers who had abandoned their site? Would I meet them too? Though the path ahead of me was less dense, I still felt guarded and wary. Who knew what else was ahead? As I stepped through the gate, I suddenly recognized the auto parts factory where I had worked as a machinist for all those years. The plant had closed almost 3 years ago now. Times were better then. I thought I could hear a faint rustling behind me. Maybe it was just the wind. One of the lockers hung open. Its contents were tossed around, like someone had been looking for something. The door was locked shut, and there was a little electronic box under the handle. A sign was pasted to the front that said, "Danger, closed for repairs." There was a large power box with 5 lights on it. Cables burst out of the box, snaking off to other parts of the factory. The metal was starting to wear, and cobwebs had collected on the corners. The box wasn't receiving power. The door was locked tight. It seemed to be connected to the power box beside it. Every part of this plant smelled old and rotted. I noticed the old bulletin board on the wall. The board contained yellowed clippings of newspaper cartoons and notices. There were notes to and from the guys that worked here. One of them was to Norman, who was one of the older guys on the line. The power panel looked like it was shut off. The open locker was stuffed with dirty work clothes and old boots. There was a photo of a woman taped to the inside, but it was scratched out, and the face was unrecognizable. It was shut tight. There was a rusty-looking card slot on the side. Our old break table. The layer of dust and grime only made seeing this sting more. The door had been hastily boarded up. Are we going to come back and find it hasn't? It's no longer boarded, like the taped door. This was Norman's locker. The door was dented like someone had punched it. I don't remember him doing that when we... A utility shelf crammed with mismatched tools and items. There was a claw hammer on the shelf, so I took it. As I took the hammer, I noticed it wasn't as dusty as the rest of the tools on the shelf. So someone used it recently. The locker was a complete mess. Hidden at the bottom, though, was a magnetic card. I slipped the key card into my pocket. That I hope. I struck with the hammer. The old wooden boards came apart easily. After I had removed the planks, I left the hammer on the floor. This was my locker, there in the factory. It stank of booze. There was a picture of Rachel on the inside. It looked like it had been torn up. I thought I had taken that picture home when the factory closed. The floor was littered with old liquor. I wondered if that man in the house had something to do. He sure had a lot of alcohol at his place. Reader. There was some kind of ventilation hatch there. It looked like I could jump to the room below. My leg hurt enough as it was, but I couldn't see another option. Before why? There had to be another way. Let me see here. So I guess I have to. Oh man, my leg hurt like hell. There was a crumpled up letter on the floor. It had been scratched out heavily and it was hard to make out. So I tried to read it. Most of the letter was violently scratched out with what looked to be a ballpoint pen. All I could make out was need to. Just don't drinking need Norman. Who was Norman writing to? Ugh. That room at the top of the plant, the one with all the bottles, it was really getting to me. Maybe I was just distracted. Who went up there and used that room? As I exited the factory, I didn't recognize where I was going. My head ached terribly and my leg was a mess. No, I want to go back in. Damn it. Okay, this is different. The garbage bin was a disgusting mess of rotten food in slick, black bags. I saw a thin greenish corner poking out from one of the bags. It was my driver's license. It looked damaged. Cleaned the card off as best I could. It looked pretty beat up. I was amazed I found my credit card and now this. I tucked the card into my wallet next to my credit card. Sounded like it was going to start raining again. I had entered Norman's place. This was the back of the store that he ran. It was oddly quiet, except for the faint sound of a television. The entrance to the front of the store was locked from the inside. Looked like I couldn't just pop it open, it needed a key. There was a bit of blood on the keyhole. The TV still flickered some indecipherable channel. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Norman, my coworker and one of the few friends I've had in this town, lay dead beside his armchair. His face and shirt were covered in blood. It looked like he'd been stabbed or something trying to get out. I mean, you deserve better than this. I wasn't sure if I wanted to give him peace or if I just couldn't stand to think anymore about what was going on. Quickly, I closed Norman's eyes. Poor bastard. I guessed this was Norman's kitchen table. He kept it clean enough, but there were water rings from 2 cups still there. The kitchen trash bin smelled fresh. I didn't dig through that mess, did I? I found a hairpin amongst the rotting food and trash and pocketed it. It's like Sticking your hand in the toilet in Silent Hill 2. Despite the shock of already finding Norman in that state, seeing this turned my stomach just as much. It was one of Rachel's old fall colts. What was it doing there? Was she okay? There was a well-maintained gun cabinet here in Norman's room. I didn't know much about guns, but it looked like he kept a few hunting rifles. Okay, I guess we can pick the lock. I used the hairpin to pick the lock. The hairpin snapped in half, so I threw it away. The general store was small, but it was clean. It had the usual things: postcards, snacks, magazines, and canned goods. I never went there much. Rachel usually stopped by after work if we needed anything. The register was mostly empty, and a fat stack of travel magazines sat beside it. The icebox seemed to be unplugged. It must have been off for a while. Most of its contents were half melted. There were various postcards from the area, especially from the tourist traps. One of the postcards showed an old black and white photo of the water. It looked to be in much better shape than. What else would I be forced to endure before? Seeing Norman up there, dead, it turned my stomach just to think of it, but I couldn't put it out of my mind. How was he involved in all this? This was getting worse and worse. I was starting to feel incredibly vulnerable. As I stepped out into the rain, I realized how close I was to home. I hoped I would soon find my answers. It was locked. This wasn't the right gate. The gate was locked tight. This wasn't my house. The neighborhood's local post box. A letter was sticking out as if someone hadn't pushed it all the way in. I knew it wasn't right, but there was no return address, but the envelope was addressed to Norman. Carefully, I tore it open and looked at the letter inside. It read, "Stay away. She's mine." That was it. No signature, no other information. It's probably from him, about Rachel. I hope I'm wrong, 'cause it's sad if it's this predictable. I'd entered our backyard. The rain gave me a terrible sense of foreboding, and it chilled me through my. I was expectant, but also. I held my breath as I approached our back door. I was terrified to step inside. It's like he knows. The house was painfully quiet. The only sound was my own breathing, ragged and strained. I flicked the light switch by the door. The power was off. I remembered having breakfast here on this very table. Was that yesterday or some time before? The door to the basement. It was locked. Where had I put the damned key? There was a small pile of mail on the floor in front of the mail slot. How long had I been away? Why hadn't Rachel picked this up? Most of the contents were bills. There was a credit card bill there. I ripped the bill open and read it. To my surprise, it said something about canceling my credit card due to non-payment. What the hell? Okay, I figured it would be. I had found the last missing piece from my wallet. The old photo of Rachel and I stared back at me, reminded me of better times. It didn't make me feel terribly comfortable. I replaced the photo in my wallet, feeling like I had got part of my life back. Still, the image made me uneasy. Why had I thrown it away? Stolen identity. Our television. I had purchased it before I knew I was going to lose my job. I felt pretty guilty about it afterward, but by then it was too late. Now this is like Gone Girl. Wouldn't that be something? The door was stuck shut. There is an old-fashioned keyhole underneath the handle. The books there were half mine, half Rachel's. Hey, now that I looked more closely, it looked like the man in that house had some of the same books as I did. Like Twilight and 50 Shades of Grey. There was a suitcase on the bed. It was Rachel's. I remembered it from that trip we took out west. Did I open the suitcase? I wasn't sure what to make of the suitcase's contents. Inside were a few days' worth of clothes, some toiletries, and a train ticket? Where is she planning to go? Our hallway mirror had been smashed, its pieces scattered around. Our sink, which needed to be replaced, one of the taps always stuck, but I hadn't got around to fixing it yet. We were lucky enough to get a house with one of those wonderful old claw-footed baths. That's the dream there. Something about those bathtubs are just great. My laptop had been left on, and only had a tiny bit of power left. On the screen was a website about the old water tower. There was a key in the top drawer of my desk. I pocketed the key. It's probably to the basement. I unlocked the basement door. There were old Christmas decorations in the box. The garbage bags were stuffed with old paint cans and supplies. There was a dirty old key here. I took the small key and tried to remember what it unlocked. Obviously had. I put up this divider wall last summer so we could create a separate room in the basement. I hadn't finished it yet, so the door was stuck and the drywall was poorly installed. I might have been able to break through if I found something heavy enough. Like what? How much backtracking do we have to do? Okay, let's see. We have a key that unlocks something. Like an attic? The laptop was warm. It had been running for a while. One book in particular seemed a bit odd. I remembered owning it, but not that edition. Rachel was pretty angry about that. Oh, goodness, where could that key go? It looked like the room had been tossed around. The furniture was a mess. Did somebody break in here? There was an old crowbar on the floor. I lifted the heavy crowbar. I appreciated its weight. Oh, we're gonna go Gordon Freeman on this. Okay. Her body's probably sealed behind that wall. Did I break through the wall with the crowbar? With a heave, I swung the crowbar at the wall. I smashed a hole large enough to step through. As I stepped through the broken wall, my breath caught in my throat. This was it. Was Rachel down there? Was she okay? Can't look. Don't look. This is all that shit from throughout the game here. I knew he was involved. Don't look. A filthy-looking pile of rags had been dumped at the corner. The stench of them was awful and made my eyes water. I was terrified to even touch the pile, to see what lay within. Far. After all this searching, after all I had seen, when I finally looked within the rags, did I finally find my Rachel? My hands trembled as I pulled back of the layers of cloth. There at the center, under all the dirt and mess, was my beloved, my Rachel. Her arms were bruised all over and slashed repeatedly. Her clothes were ripped and torn, and even through all that sickening blood, it was obvious she had been stabbed to death. The knife I had carried all this way suddenly seemed like a poison. What had happened, Rachel? Who did this to you? I thought about all I had seen, and wondered if any of it could help me figure out who had done this. And when I couldn't stay there any longer, I stepped away on shaky legs and made my way back upstairs. Reluctantly, exhausted from my journey, I could no longer resist the urge to close my eyes. Grim discovery. Maybe I would use some of Rachel's travel books and find some place to go. Intact. Either I dropped that stuff or somebody else did. Maybe I was sleepwalking. Or maybe somebody stole it from me. Norman's store, that forest, the water. Was I at those places before? I didn't see how it could have happened any other way. I must have been the one to lose my wallet and its contents. What does that mean? Within the few broken pieces that remained of that meal, I could see my face had grown pale and weak. I couldn't bear to look again. It was like I didn't actually expect a reflection. I felt empty and drained. The reflection in that grimy glass was only a shadow, a whisper. I still loved the old-time charm of that claw-footed bathtub that seemed like cold comfort then. It was the key card I found in the factory, the one that allowed me to slip through that door. It seemed to me that it was probably Norman's, but if that was true, what was he doing back at the plant? Did I think Norman was going back to the factory? It must have been him. He must have been using the old locker, and the old locker room. The laptop had finally run out of power. This was the old photo of that other man and his wife, I assumed. I found it in that house. I recalled those faded remains I had found, deep underneath his house. What had he done there? Well, what did I think? Was that man involved in this whole mess somehow? Definitely. Those tunnels, the odd tools in his house, and the remains of his wife. He wasn't innocent, that's for sure. My old office safe sat on the floor. I used to keep tax records and other important documents in it. It used a digital passcode lock, but I didn't have the code. Maybe I had left it somewhere. I leafed through the notebook I had taken from the forest. In it were the names that had been written down. Via Ashley, Cheryl, Iris, Daphne, Holly, Rose, Rachel. I recalled the names I saw scratched out on that old desk, deep within those musty tunnels. Was the man in that house really up to something? It was the letter I had taken from the post box. Who had it out for Norman? Who sent him that letter? It must have been someone from the neighborhood. Or at least somebody wanted it to look that. I wasn't sure what to think. Did he murder Rachel? Norman had ended up dead himself. Whoever sent that threatening letter must have got to him. Who the hell was that? From now on, I'd have no one to get angry with me for stupid things like buying this TV. It seemed like I had seen all there was. Maybe I thought I was ready to go back into the basement. Maybe there wouldn't be anything for me. But I had to take a last look. If I was guilty, I would take this to a warm, safe place and do something about it. I took the knife and kept it firm. Now that I stood there, I realized I couldn't go. I needed to put an end to this situation, one way or another. There would be no more dinners here, no more chit-chat over breakfast, at least not for us. The mail still sat there, heaped on the floor. How long had Rachel been lying in the basement? I knew I needed to escape that nightmare. But what about the knife I still carried? I wondered, even if I left, would it really be over? So, did I leave that house forever? Living in this town hadn't been easy. The plant had helped in some way to stay grounded. It kept me in line, gave me something to do, and helped me get away from my past. When the factory closed, everything changed. I guess that was when I had started sleepwalking, disappearing for hours at a time. I had MRIs and piles of doctor's reports, but nothing seemed to help, not even drinking. But I swear I had tried to give it up. I know it. The sleepwalking never really went away, though. But I know Rachel had tried. I know she had tried to be there for me, even when everything was falling apart. This night had unearthed terrible truths, but I knew it was a final act of a long-standing horror I'd been living. Waking up in that house tonight was the final cruelty. I wish I had remained unconscious in that room. It was obvious to me that the man I had found in that house had something to do with all this. Could he have killed Rachel? It started to seem that there were too many things I had seen to think otherwise. After making it out of those tunnels, I thought those sewers might feel safer. I was wrong. The security tape I had watched showed someone being attacked by what looked like two people. But who was it that was attacked? I had found the contents of my wallet scattered throughout. Why the hell had I been out there? Had my sleepwalking gone to some new extreme? The thought that I couldn't account for my whereabouts, but knew I had been to that forest and even Norman's place, well, it was terrifying. I didn't know what that meant, but at least I had recovered my things. Hopefully, I thought, that would cover my tracks so I wouldn't be blamed for all this. Deep within those woods, though, was where things became truly awful. Finding that notebook only made things worse. Rachel's name had been on that list, so what terrible plot was she a part of? There was a similar list of names on that desk back in those tunnels. What was the connection? It was clear, at least, that Norman had been going back to the old. Maybe he was the one who had boarded up that locker room, who had been drinking up there in that secret hiding place. So had he killed that guard? So had he killed that guard then? He must have. Maybe was found out, or the guard had caught him on patrol. Norman, why? After the factory, I thought I might find some solace if I could just get to Norman's store. But all I had found were more horrors. Now that I really consider it, that's when I should have seen it coming. How did you get mixed up in all this? I know you weren't a perfect man. None of us are. But you didn't deserve this. Maybe whoever had done you in was responsible for the other murders that happened in that. At the very least, I was convinced you and Rachel were killed by the same person. I sincerely hoped you would find some peace, my friend. I knew I never would. When I had marched through the rain towards home, I desperately clung to the hope that this would end. And I guess in a way it did. But how could I have known how hopeless it all was? I had started to feel as disoriented as when I sleepwalked, to think of it now. I guess I should have known from the terrible silence that greeted me when I first stepped into her house and stood there in the kitchen. There was no sound of television, radio. Even the air was still. But seeing Rachel there, lying ruined and discarded in the basement, that was a horror I could. I didn't know if I'd ever find the answers I craved, but I knew that somehow, that other man I had found was responsible for this. If not directly, he must have had a hand in Rachel's death. So what was I doing in that damned house of his? Had I found out? Had I killed him? My damned condition made it difficult. Memories and time frames were always a mess, and I could never be sure. Knowing that man was dead, though, was cold comfort. My wife was gone, and no matter what happened to me now, I was lost forever. As I swung open the door and stepped out into the air, I caught the scent of wet grass and fog. Rachel, my beautiful wife. Just the thought of her again, cold and shook me from it. What would I do now? Who could I turn to? It would only be a matter of time before the police got involved, before the neighbors knew. The front lawn was soft and giving beneath my feet. And there, but rather that I should run. Okay. Hmm. That was interesting. I'm assuming there's multiple endings, though. Not sure what Norman's involvement was. I feels like I'm thinking he maybe was having an affair with Rachel because her coat was over there. And my character was definitely killing people with someone else. That's sweet. That should I'm thinking he thinks that's sweet, but and it probably is with their relationship, but still it's just kind of in poor taste, the little side note there. Okay. Well, that was a very short game. Pretty interesting. I'm going to probably mess around and see what, try and cover more of the mystery here, but this was kind of a nice change of pace, just very atmospheric and kind of just like putting some puzzle pieces together. It's a little too obvious though that he's involved in in some murders though, but still not bad. All right, well that's it for this playthrough. I'll see you all again later. Do please subscribe and like, greatly appreciate it. And we'll be back with some Resident Evil, maybe.